So today's episode, I want to talk about generational wealth. I want to talk about generational wealth because, number one, for some reason, it seems to be one of those phrases that everybody says and everybody thinks, or I shouldn't say everybody thinks, but everybody is, I guess, who's actively wants to be financially free is actively pursuing, or so they say. I want to also talk about it because I think it's one of those catchphrases, especially in the Black community, because we don't have a lot of generational wealth being passed down. And I also got into a really interesting conversation with a guy that I met at an event, and we started having all these conversations, and we landed on this subject. And it's a subject that keeps kind of popping its head up. So I wanted to address some things and bring up some points about it, because I think it's one of those things that when we talk about something like generational wealth, it's said in a kind of way that we think of it's I'm accumulating a bunch of money, and then I'm going to hand it to my children, and they're going to pass it down to their children, and they're going to pass it down to their children. Or they look at it as if, well, I'm going to accumulate all this money, and I'm going to accumulate so much money that the money will be able to last for a very long time, multi generations. All right. And I wanted to talk about that because I personally don't think people understand what they're actually talking about. For instance, how long is a generation? How long would you say a generation is? Right? I just Googled it. I was going to say about 20 years. Google says that the generation average now is about 25 years, obviously, because we live a lot longer than our ancestors did, right? Generation typically was 20, now it's more like 25 years. Now just think about the world, right? I mean, 25 years ago was what, 1997, right? Think about all the things that have happened since 1997 and to 2022. The market, the real estate stocks, the countries. I mean, our social fabric, our laws, what we considered taboo. All of those things from 97 until 2022, you had to navigate, overcome, and figure out a way to not only build wealth, maintain wealth, but also pass it down, right? So when you think about that, when you really think about generational wealth, is it just an amount of money? No. So I thought about these things, and I have about 4 or 5 points that I wanted to talk about. The number one thing when we talk about generational wealth and building generational wealth is not the money. You have to have a generation. Well, how do you produce a generation? You have to have a family. Well, how do you have a family? You got to get married and have children. So if you're not married and you don't have children, you don't have a seed to pass on what you're trying to accumulate or what you're trying to do, well, then you cannot have generational wealth. Now, it's very, very important when we think about these things. And we think about these things, we have to think about them in a three-dimensional way. I'm a very linear thinker. I'm a very logical step-by-step thinker. I think in a line, and I'm able to think very far down the line, and I'm able to go backwards and kind of reverse engineer what I need to do in order to get to where I see. That's why I've been able to be successful at what I do. That is one of my gifts, but it's also one of my Achilles heel, because I don't necessarily think in three-dimensional ways. It's something that I have to continually learn and continually push myself to think about or to think of. That's where women have a lot of men at an advantage, because women think in very 3D, three-dimensional color patterns, where men tend to think more linear, right? And so when you think about this subject from more of a 360 degree, you have to understand that the main word in generational wealth is generational. In order to have a generation, you must have a family. Now, let's say you do have a family. And let's say you're working and you're doing what you need to do. A lot of people have to work very hard every day at their job. And then they're doing things on the side. Maybe there's several things. And over time, maybe they're doing stocks, real estate, maybe they're doing coaching, whatever it is that they're doing, they're trying to generate income to build up a nest egg for retirement, and hopefully to be able to pass on that wealth to their children. Second part of that is you have children, great, and you're doing all these things, great. But there has to be a certain point in which you now take your son or your daughter, whoever it is, and if you can do more than one, hats off to you. But whoever it is that you're going to train to take over or to invest or inherit, there has to be a time in which they have basically what's called an apprenticeship. And I liken this to the Medici family of Italy, the historical wealthy bankers, and how the Medicis as a family were a family of bankers, because it went from father to son, and that's what they did. And when the son hit a certain age, typically around 8, 9, 10 years old, the father would take him under his wing and start teaching him the business, and not just the business of what to do on a day-to-day thing, but the business of politics, because the actual day-to-day operations was very political. And there was noble families and there was things like that. And these are things that you cannot learn from a school, right? School is not designed to teach you how to interact socially and how to negotiate business-wise and how to fit into the mold. It's designed to teach you the very basics of how things operate. And the highest calling of the highest learning is to teach you how to think, right? To be critical thinkers. You can argue these days whether or not our institutions do this. I would say they don't. I think they're more along the lines of indoctrination rather than actual stimulation of trying to create a thesis in your mind and be able to defend what you believe. But that's another conversation. So the Medici family and families like it would train up their sons to inherit the business. And so are you doing that with your kids, right? Are you planning on doing that with your kids? Do you want to have your children take over what you have? And if you do, you should think about, I want to identify, which child would be best suited to this business, because not all children will be, right? You can't fit a round peg into a square hole. So to understand that and to train them and to have that prepared, I think that's something we don't think about as well. The other part of that is the family, your family, however you are leading your family, must buy into the fact that your family's name is what you're investing in. Okay? So if you want to have generational wealth or any kind of multi-generational business, it's always based on your name, because your name symbolizes, it epitomizes your reputation. So typically you would have a patriarch, a father who builds a business and is the head of the family, and he works 40, 50 years on building this business and building this brand. And he hands it down, he passes it down to his seed, his son, and his son takes that business and he works on it and he builds the brand bigger. And that family name now has been around for 70, 80, 90, 100 years. And when you say that name in a certain industry, or maybe that name has become so big that it actually leaks out into other industries. That name now symbolizes a feeling, right? It's not a matter of trust. It actually says something, or it makes you feel something, right? Security, trust, dependable. It makes you feel safe, right? So if you have any kind of trusted name in your industry and it's been around for a long time, the brand itself, the name itself becomes something. And I liken this to real estate, right? So there's certain names in real estate that you just know that if you interacted with them, you know that you're in a whole nother league, a whole nother area. And it doesn't even need to be, national or worldly. It could just be locally. You could be doing real estate or some kind of business locally for 30 years, and people just know your name, and it says, and that's all they need to say is your name. But someone actually has to go out and build that reputation and shake the hands and do the deals and take the losses and do all of those things. So to think about that is your family, your sons or your daughters or whoever it is you're passing this business or this money to, they need to understand that it's bigger than they are. It's bigger than you. It's bigger than your wife. Your family has to buy into the identity that you're trying to build, that you're trying to create. It's not just about me. It's not just about your son or your daughter or your wife. It's about the family name. And everyone needs to be able to understand that, articulate that, and buy into that fact so that they're putting the family before themselves. That's the only way that you're able to progress through 25 years and longer for any kind of business, because they're not doing it for themselves. They're doing what's best for the family. Then you can go out and generate the money, right? You have the family, you got the plan, you have your children, your family understands it's bigger than them. They have their name, you have your name, and now you're all in. Now you get to go do the fun part, which is go figure it out, right? Whatever it is that you're going to do, you figure it out, you generate the money. Great. What do you do then? You got to learn how to protect the money, right? Trusts, estate planning. You're going to have to add people on your team, financial advisors, lawyers, bankers, and as you are going out into the world and generating the money, you are networking with other human beings in other fields that you'll be able to acquire and befriend. And over time, you will find these people. These people will come into your life, and you'll be able to establish those relationships. You'll be able to protect your money, and you'll be able to do those things that will put you on the path to generational wealth. And then that all ties into the last part, passing it on. So if you pass it on to your children, the conversation that I had yesterday, we were talking about children because we're both fathers. Shout out to Daniel Sintana. We were talking about when your kids go off to school and how education is important. And we were talking about how there's a lot of people out there, especially these days, that are college graduates with a sociology degree, marketing degree, philosophy degree, history degree, and they're, bussing tables. They're in a completely different field than what their college education that they paid for, or it's just they got into something they didn't do enough research, they didn't like it, and they got out of it, and they're a salesperson somewhere. And I don't want to say it's wasted, because it's not wasted. You still have probably friends or a frat, or your network got established or something like that. There's always good that you can glean out of any situation. But how much more would it have been if you were actually going to college for a specific thing that you were planning on and bringing it back to your family for a specific purpose, and it was targeted, right? It's just like any marketing campaign. You could spend a bunch of money. You could spend a whole boatload of money on this broad spectrum marketing campaign and get no return on your investment. Or you can get down really focused and really niche and hone in those dollars and spend a quarter of that and get a way better return. And it's because you did targeted marketing, you did targeted campaigns, and you knew exactly what you were looking for. It's the same thing with your life. And I think that a lot of people just go through the steps that they're told that they have to go through, and what used to work before, right? In the 40s and the 50s and the 60s was you can go to college basically for free, get a degree, get a really good high paying job, and be able to provide for your family. That's not how it is now. So why do we keep doing this old way of thinking to try to live in a modern era that just doesn't work? So now you have a whole bunch of kids going to school, getting in hundreds of thousands of student loan debt that they can't pay off, and then getting a job that doesn't allow them to afford to pay off the loans that they took out to get the job. Doesn't make any sense, right? So we're talking about that. And I'm bringing all this up because if you're talking about generational wealth and you want to pass a business on to your child, then sending them off to college just to send them off to college doesn't make any sense. And if you are sending them off to college, it shouldn't be to just go find yourself, right? It shouldn't be you're 18 now, go off into the world and make a bunch of mistakes. That's what you did. And you regret it. You're angry. You always think to yourself, if I knew what I know now back when I was this age, right? I know you've said it. I've said it. Everyone says it. And yet you still have the mindset of just go off and make a bunch of mistakes, right? Or go off and figure it out. Why are we doing that? Why are we perpetuating a cycle of failure? It doesn't make any sense to me. If you're going to send your child off to college, send them off for a specific reason because they're going to do something specific. And I think a lot of parents, they don't think along these lines of sometimes you have to do more than guide. You have to direct. And sometimes you have to do more than just direct. Sometimes you have to dictate. You have to tell them what to do. And no child likes to be told what to do. No human being likes to be told what to do. But that's what has to be done in order to get the outcomes that you want. And they're not going to understand that now. Just like when you tell your child don't touch the stove and they get angry because they see it's red and they want to touch it as it looks cool. They don't understand it's hot and it'll burn their hand and they're going to have a burn for a long time. They could have a scar. They don't get that, but you understand, right? So it's no difference at 5 than it is at 18. They need to be told what to do, and they need to have a direction. And once that direction is fulfilled, then if they want to decide to change that, that's fine. But at least they have a direction and they're not floundering through life saying things like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what to do. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know who I want to be. Because just like you, I know 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds who are still saying the same thing. And there's a lot more unsuccessful, unfulfilled, unfettered, rolling, doddering, confused, lost, aimlessly walking people in the world than there are focused, motivated, ambitious, and tenacious, successful people. Did the latter find something out that the former didn't? Did they unlock a secret key? I don't think so. I think they just had one thing, purpose. And purpose is given, right? So the best thing that we could do for our children is give them a purpose and a focus. And if they decide to change it, that's on them. But at least you're sending that arrow out and they're on a direction and they're on a path. And they have something that they know will pan out. So when we think about that, and also to add to that, if you want generational wealth and you have a business or some kind of, I don't want to say empire, but some kind of portfolio of something that you're managing, do they need it? Or is it something that they can't already learn on their own? Right? I didn't go to college. I just worked really, really hard. And anything that I was curious about, I'm very curious. So anything I'm curious about, I read, I studied, I learned. I found people who did it. I went out into the world. And I think that's something that we've lost. We want everything to be on easy mode. We want everything to just come to us. We're so used to the fingertip, the information being at our fingertips. We aren't really prepared to do that kind of hard work or know that we need to do that hard work. It needs to be said. So I think the big thing on generational wealth is, number one, family. Number two, building the name. Number three, making sure that the next generation is fully focused and understands it's bigger than they are. And then having a direction. Then you can go out and get the money. Because what happens, and I know this is what's going to happen. I already know what's going to happen. You have a whole bunch of people out there chasing the bag, right? Trying to get a whole bunch of money. And let's say they do. But they spend all their time chasing the bag. They didn't think about these things. They didn't have any plan with their children. They didn't plan on getting any children. And they're either single parents, not married, no kids, or they're married with kids. They didn't apprentice their children. They didn't pay attention to them. And so now when they're older and they're ready to go to college, they're not listening to the parents. They don't care about what the parents do. There's too much at stake, especially in my community, in the black community. And I'm going to really focus hard on our situation, because I think our situation, I know our situation is the worst across the board statistically. And it's something that I am on a mission to educate my people, because the one thing that is apparent on every single conversation that I have with men and women that look like me, that have my color, they lack the knowledge, right? And there's the biblical principle. There's a biblical verse that says, my people perish due to lack of knowledge. And it's absolutely true. And just by having a little bit of knowledge, I was able to change my life. I had to seek the knowledge. In some cases, I paid for it. But because of that, it enabled me to think at a higher level. And because I was able to think at a higher level, I was able to make more money. So Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, is absolutely true. The more you know, the more money you'll make. You still have to work hard, but you can work really hard at a low level and make a low wage, or you can work really hard at a high level and make a lot more money. So that's the goal here. So when you think about generational wealth, I want you to think of these things. I want you to think that it's more than just money. The foundation is the generation, because you need to have responsible adults that look like you, that carry your name, to have the same philosophy and value and belief system that will carry them through the next generation, and be able to weather the storms, and to be able to make the right decisions, and to be able to teach their children that it was my dad, your grandfather, who taught me, who showed me. And it's bigger than you. It's bigger than me. It's our family legacy. It's our family name. A lot of people are talking about legacy now. I don't think they have any idea what it means. I don't think they've sat down and really thought about what is a legacy and how do I build it? Because here's what's going to happen. And I already know this for my family. The only way you get generational wealth and legacy is that the person who starts it has to sacrifice their life. They have to be the ones to sacrifice their entire life. You might have to sacrifice your entire life, and you may not ever get to really enjoy the spoils of what the later generations will get to inherit. For example, Martin Luther King. He had to sacrifice his life, and he didn't get to see America and Black people rise out of segregation and to do the things that we're doing now. He had to pay the price for all of us to get the ticket. Are you willing to do that with your family? Are you willing to do all of the work so that your children get to inherit everything else? And then if that's so, are you absolutely certain that your children are being raised in a manner worthy to receive the gifts and the sacrifices that you gave? Think about that one. Generational wealth. The reason that all of this got brought up and has been brewing in my mind is because over the last, I'd say week, maybe week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, but I've come across on social media a couple of times where I've seen a billionaire talk about they're not leaving any money to their kids at all. I can't remember his name. He's worth $50 billion. He's an older white guy. I don't know if it's sales or something, but he's an intense guy. He's older. He's got to be like 70s or something, but he dresses really sharp. I don't remember his name, but he was talking about how he's not leaving his kids anything. And he says that poverty is the best thing, that it's the best way to create millionaires, right? Because it's motivation. Nobody wants to be poor. But anyways, the billionaires were saying and I saw one with Floyd Mayweather, and Floyd was saying how his kids, he got him a house, he got him a car, take him shopping. They would hit him up and say, I need some money to shop, or I need some money to do this. And he realized he was being hit up as an ATM. And he says, I said, I'd cut him off. I'd cut off my children. I'd cut him off. And I told them if they wanted to start a business, I told them if they want to start a business, I'll help them out. But other than that, don't hit me up for nothing. In other words, I'll help you figure out how to generate your own money or how to build your own self, but I'm not going to pay for your ride in life, right? And it's because he was thinking generational wealth, right? They both were. And I'm assuming because the guy talked about poverty, the other billionaire probably came from nothing, most likely, just like Floyd, right? So, and he's thinking generational wealth. But they both failed and violated rule number 2. You must teach the generation you're handing it down to the duty to the family. They must understand what it takes to generate, maintain, protect, and pass on the amount of money. And if you do that enough times, money no longer becomes the problem. Money no longer becomes an issue. The generating of money no longer is something that is worried about. It is something that is known, that is standard in their programming, to where money no longer is an issue. Now it's about what problems in the world can we solve? Who do we need to know and who do we need to connect with in order to solve the problem that we're looking to solve? Because it's from the inside out, not from the outside in. And all of these things I'm talking about are very high level things. They're very intense things. They're very hard things. They're very deep things. But they're things that need to be addressed because even the people that have all that money, Gates is not giving money to his children. It's all going to philanthropy. Why? Because they're afraid that their kids will squander it. Why? Because they did not do the job to invest in their children to make sure they would do the right things. And we can go on and on about that, but I wanted to throw that out to you guys. And the last couple of things that I took down, I have notes here that I thought about was fathers and fatherhood. We have a strange thing going on in our country where we are. I shouldn't say we. There's a certain narrative being pushed that men can be women and women can be men. And there's gender neutrality and it's malleable and it's all of this stuff. And if you buy into that, then you buy into the fact that your family, as far as roles, designations, and how things operate in the family are completely wiped out. And it kills me because if any community understands the devastating aftermath and effects of not having a father in the household, it is the Black community. There is a direct correlation between single motherhood, lack of fathers being in the house, and the amount of money generated. And there's studies, I pull it up. The highest is the Asian community. 11% single motherhood, on average household income is over $100,000. The lowest is the Black community. We're at a 77% single motherhood rate, and the average household makes around $40,000. Little bit more. And that, I think that was in 2018. We have to understand something, that if you want to talk about generational wealth, it starts with leadership in the house. And leadership always has to be maintained, it has to be supported, and it has to be encouraged, which is why I argue I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, you shouldn't publicly defame or denounce your president because your president represents your country. And if you defame that on a national or world stage, it just makes you look bad. It makes your own house look bad, right? A divided house can't stand. So leadership has to be maintained, encouraged, and supported. And fathers, you know, we take the biggest brunt because that's what we're designed to do. We have to. It's our duty. And it's something that you can complain about, but it's not going to change, right? So you only complain about things you can change. So if you can't change it, why complain about it? So I wanted to talk about that. And that'll probably be its own separate podcast or its own separate episode. But I wanted to put that in your mind too. The last couple of things, making money is easy. Keeping it takes discipline. Passing it down takes diligence and accountability. You can go get a job, make money. But people spend it. They don't know how to invest it. They don't know how to send it out and bring it back with more friends, like Brad Lea says, right? They also don't know how to protect it. They don't know about trust. They don't know about estate planning. They don't even know what that is. And diligence and accountability are something that is lacking within our society right now. We are high consumers. We are not very good investors, and we're not very good at extending our dollar. I think it says the average, the dollar circulates in our household, the Black household, when we get paid, I think an average of, is it 7 hours? It's either 7 hours or 7 minutes. It's ridiculous. And I think the average Caucasian family's dollar circulates 7 days, right? Which is incredible when you think about that. And then the last thing I'll say is, however wealthy you want to be, the equation is the amount of self-discipline equals the amount of wealth. Everything comes down to self-discipline. It is correlated to all success. Nobody who is successful is undisciplined. And the higher self-discipline you have, the more success you will have. That is something I absolutely struggle with because naturally I'm lazy. I don't want to do anything. But I'm willing to sacrifice and do the work now so I can be lazy later. That's the only difference about me. I know that if I don't pay for it now, I'll pay for it later. And I don't want to pay for it later. I'd rather pay for it now and do what I have to do now and lose now. I want to take all the L's now so I don't have to do anything later. I can enjoy life with my wife. It's hard now. It's painful now. The losses suck now. I've lost tens of thousands of dollars. Deals, relationships, hours, sleep, don't get to see my kids. Go down all of that. But the sacrifice is now so that it's later and for a longer period of time. And that's really what it's about. Investing isn't just about investing money. It's about investing time. And if you can diversify your portfolio in the market, you can diversify your time so that what you're sowing with your time will reap benefits later. And all I'm saying is don't get so focused on the money and generating the money that you forget that you have to have a family. And that family has to be nurtured in a certain way, and it has to be focused in a certain way. And it's not going to be done immediately. You need to have the plans, you need to have the steps in place, but everybody needs to be on board. And whatever age you decide to start that apprenticeship and let it grow little by little over time. That's what generational wealth has to be in order to be a Rothschild or a Rockefeller or a Kennedy or a Trump or whatever American name that you know has multi-generational wealth. So hopefully you guys learned some things. Hopefully I said some things that will rewire you a little bit. And hopefully you took from this something that you can use in your life, with your family, with your thinking, with your business, and can't wait to do the second episode.